Welcome, everyone, to Redacted on this Monday. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
And on this show, we attempt to seek the truth, looking through the smoke screen from the Western media outlets and try to bring you the real stories and cover the real angles that you're not going to hear any other place. So we've got a jam-packed show for you on this Monday. We're going to look at, talk about spending hours going through the data today on where we are at in this war in Ukraine. It's crazy. And the Western media propaganda machine is full tilt this weekend. You might have seen some of it. So we're going to try to unpack where we are with this offensive that was led by Ukraine, and where are the Russian forces at this hour? What are both sides saying?
Also, the Trump campaign and Trump allies say they have been raided by the FBI, dozens of them, in fact. We're going to break down what we know about this and whether or not this is, in fact, the gathering of the administrative state.
Yeah, we're also going to look at cryptocurrency and the Biden administration. You know, we've been seeing this in Western countries when there's concern about their currency, right? And they're trying to protect the Canadian dollar, the US dollar, the euro. Well, one of the big, of course, affronts to those currencies is not only what Russia and China are doing, but also cryptocurrency.
Yes.
And so we're going to see the latest White House moves against cryptocurrency and what this means for the future of our financial system tonight.
Plus, we are going to talk about 9/11. Today is the 12th of September, but yesterday was the 21st anniversary of the attacks on New York City. And we are going to talk about that legacy because, you know, there is this sort of collective invitation to commemorate what happened to us collectively. I think that's important, but it's also important to figure out why that happened, what's happened since. So we're going to try and put some context there, if that's even possible.
That's right. And we are live, so thank you for joining us live here on Redacted at 4 p.m. Eastern. Every day, someone in the chat just said, I love the show, but your intro, we got to get rid of your intro. No, there's a reason there's a 30-minute intro at the beginning of our show, because not everyone watches us on time. So we're always here at the same time, 4 p.m. Eastern time. But we do the intro so that it gets the alerts out there. You can get your YouTube alerts. You can get your Rumble alerts.
You can get your cup of coffee.
You can get your cup of coffee, and then you can come back and pop in. And if you're watching us later, you can always just scrub right through that 30-minute intro and start right here. So Redacted starts right now.
All right, we all here? Everyone,
welcome.
Everyone present and accounted for. Let's take roll call of all the 7,000 people here. Clayton?
I'm here. David's here. Philip's here. Someone in the chat said, I love the intro. Someone said, well, a 10-minute intro would be more appropriate. It's like, well, no. We're live at 4 p.m. Eastern. So it shouldn't matter if there's a 5-hour intro, right? Like, you see my logic in this, right? Like,
no, because you just made the point that we need a long intro, but not that long.
I'm saying we need a long intro because the alerts, YouTube takes its sweet ass time to send out alerts, and a lot of people don't even get them on time, right, David?
Right, exactly. So you basically just be here at 4 p.m. and you'll be good. You don't have to worry about the intro if you don't want to.
But it's a great opportunity. Everyone can gather up and chat and hang out, and I'm in there watching the chat.
Well, that's why we also
make
it educational.
Yeah, we've got some great stuff in there.
We put stuff in there, yeah.
We've got a newsletter every day as well. If you go to redacted.inc, that's the place to go, redacted.inc. It's a great newsletter. It's published first thing in the morning. It's totally free, and it's delivered to your inbox first thing, or you can read it over your cup of coffee. If you go to Redacted, let me pull up here, sorry.
On today's newsletter, you might have learned that it is our youngest child's birthday today. Our baby girl Eve is 6. And you know what I love? That here in Portugal, they congratulate the mom on the baby's birthday because it's an anniversary of when I did all the work, right? Yeah. So it's wonderful when you go around the world with your little baby and they're like, congrats to the mom too. And I'm like, I love that. So it's a holiday for me too.
Yes, I didn't do very much work. I went and got coffee and brought you some cold drinks.
Oh no, Clayton was a great videographer when our kids were born.
I did a lot. Anyway, so yes, please go to redacted.inc and sign up for our free newsletter. I guess my laptop's not coming in today. But anyway, please do that. And you can support the show and everything we do here on the channel. So we've got a jam-packed show for you on this Monday. I hope everyone is doing well. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. And we're going to dive into some big stories now. Let's talk about Russia. Let's talk about Ukraine and the very latest here. And I was telling Philip in our pre-show, this is one of those days where I was talking to a number of journalists today, talking to sources at NATO, gathering information as much as I could to pull all of this together, because for crying out loud, you cannot trust anything the Western media says about this conflict.
In fact, every mainstream Western news outlet is fawning all over themselves about how much Ukraine has made directives. In fact, one news report saying this is like military advance that will be in the history books.
Right. This is like World War II.
Right.
Like, you're going to teach this in schools.
This is like battle of whatever that needs to be, some kind of big military strategy success. So what's really going on?
So what in the world is actually happening in Ukraine? Over the weekend, if you're in the West, you might have started seeing headlines like this and rumblings on social media. This is Drudge. Look at this. They've got the big front page here. Russia on the run. Invaders pushed back to border. Thousands of troops flee. Greatest counteroffensive since World War II, it says. Now, if you watch Sunday television, you would have heard the same thing, whether it was Meet the Press or Face the Nation or any of those shows. You could have watched smiling, almost giddy news anchors reporting that Russia is now losing the war. And they're saying this with a straight face. Watch.
Ukrainian troops are claiming some major victories this weekend as they fight to take back territory occupied for months by Russian forces. It is a fast-moving counteroffensive by the Ukrainian military that analysts say shows that the tide of the war is shifting. CNN's Melissa Bell is in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Melissa, give us an update.
Yeah, and so she's, so giddy about it too, just like smiling, like, wow, look at what's happening to Ukraine. And
Russia on the ropes.
Russia is on the ropes. Let's get out to Melissa right now, who's nowhere near the battle, to give us an update on what's actually happening. So Patrick Lancaster is one of the few journalists who's actually been in that region. And he tweeted this. He said, "Don't be fooled by the propaganda saying that Ukraine has made major gains. They have made gains, but not major. Russia and pro-Russian forces control over 120,000 square kilometers of what is internationally recognized as Ukrainian army territory. This week, Ukrainian army gained back control of 2,000. Facts." So
that's
what?
1.6%.
Yeah.
That they have regained. So, that's something, sure.
That is something. And we're going to show you, look, this is not to belittle it, because I'm going to show you why there is a very important part of this action. We'll get to it in a minute. So what happened? Well, it's best described by showing some maps and facts. How about that? Maps and facts tonight. We're going to get there in a second, okay? But first, Ukraine launched 2 offensives over the past few weeks. First, in Kherson, which was a total failure. Really, a total failure. Even the Washington Post had this to say about it in a summation of the Battle of Kherson offensive. Wounded Ukrainian soldiers reveal steep toll of Kherson offensive. And then let me just pull this up. This is a pig farmer. Look at this guy. I'm going to read this. He says, "We've lost 5 people for every one that they did," said Ihor, a 30-year-old platoon commander who injured his back when the tank he was riding in crashed into a ditch. Ihor had no military experience before Russia's invasion of Ukraine on February 24th. He made a living selling animal feed to pig and cow farms. His replacement as platoon commander also has no previous military experience, he says. He is a commander. Now, you go from pig farmer in a few months to commander. They lost thousands of people at the Battle of Kherson. Thousands of men. Didn't gain anything as a result. Nothing. Next was the new offensive near Kharkiv. That one turned out differently. So that's what we're going to talk about now. That one has turned out dramatically differently. A counteroffensive near Kharkiv and south of Kharkiv near Izium. So here's a map just to give you a little frame of reference. There's Kharkiv up to the upper left. There's Izium down to the lower part of your screen there. Notice it's next to a giant river. Ukraine was supposed to launch a counteroffensive back in March. Remember, do you guys remember this? We kept hearing about there was going to be this counteroffensive, get ready.
Yes.
That Ukraine is going to, now we know that, Russia invaded. And then in March, we were hearing, get ready, Zelensky, the army, they're all getting ready. We're sending all these weapons. Ukraine is going to launch this counteroffensive. Well, it never happened. There's a reason it never happened. Their forces were destroyed and they were surprised by Russia at every turn. Russia made advancements that Ukraine never saw coming, which is stunning considering, if you think about this, right? NATO forces had been training Ukraine for 8 years to get ready for an attack on Donbass and Crimea. So they were totally caught flat-footed in this. And no amount of Western propaganda and the ghost of Kiev and the Snake Island, all that bullshit. Remember that? Mm-hmm. Like there was the ghost of, he was shooting down on these Russian planes. And what other stuff did we hear? We heard all kinds of crazy stuff. We heard,
like models and
models
and soccer moms were strapping
yeah.
up for battle, that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, and when they drove through that town with all the bodies on the street and you could see people's arms moving after the cars drove by.
Yeah, I mean, well, you say NATO forces have been training Ukraine for 8 years to get ready for this attack, but not these guys, right?
Right. No, and this is the point, right? So this battle now around Kharkiv and Kharkov and into now towards the river, we'll get there in a second. This is the last of them.
Yeah.
Like this is like their last breath. And here's Joaquin Flores. He describes what happens next. He says all of this move towards Kharkiv forced the West to carry out an urgent mobilization among the Ukrainian population as cannon fodder to put out the front of the defense while the units were urgently trained to compensate for the destroyed assault and mechanized brigades. It was necessary to compose Bucha, as David was just talking about. So he was just saying this. It was necessary to compose Bucha as an excuse for military assistance. Yeah, the people lying in the streets,
yes.
right? People moving, all of that. So this was all in an effort to replenish the destroyed equipment and weapons of the Soviets, such as from the countries of the former members of the Warsaw Pact, and as a result, the mass supply of weapons to NATO, artillery, air defense equipment. He goes on to say, it even got to the point that NATO, and with grief and half-formed assault units, had to be filled with experienced NATO soldiers under the guise of foreign legions. Since the entire Ukrainian assault elite was disposed of in half a year by the fire of Russian weapons or taken prisoner at Avastal. So basically...
So those guys who'd been being trained for 8 years, they were the first ones out.
They were the first ones out.
And so you're stuck now with pig farmers.
Yeah, pig farmers and whoever's
left. And people
left.
who really have no business in war.
Or NATO. And NATO forces and people who are there under the guise of being a foreign legion. We're just happen to be here, but we're actually part of NATO. We're actually part of this, forces that are pushing against into the Donbass. So he goes on to say that this is further evidence that NATO is prepared to use any and all fight to the last Ukrainian. Think about that. Like this is NATO. This is all, we've been saying this from the beginning. They do not care about the Ukrainian people at all. They're going to use them until the last Ukrainian dies. That's what their plan is. And there will be no Ukrainians left to fight. That's it.
Right. Drag this out. Doesn't matter who. And, for anyone in the chat right now who I see saying, oh, this is pro-Russian, this is propaganda, what we're saying. No, it's not. We don't want any more fighting, period. We are pro-peace 100%. Peace talks have been on the table, but continue to be moved off the table because the West is being toyed with to believe that Ukraine can win this while people die. People like this pig farmer who was dragged into a conflict that he should never have been in.
Yeah. Yeah. And as Noam Chomsky pointed out, the only way that this ends is with a peace settlement, a peace agreement. That's it on the part of Ukraine. Russia is not going to lose this eastern part of Ukraine that has been under attack for the last 8 years. It's not going to happen. So you can get it out of your head. They are not going to allow NATO to push further up against their border. It's not going to happen. And by the way, NATO violated their agreements, their 2014 agreements. This was never supposed to happen. They violated it anyway. They violated it going back to Bill Clinton's era. So they continued to violate this and didn't live up to their agreement. So to further illustrate this point tonight and drive this home, here is the map of the Izium region in the northeast of Ukraine on September 4th. So there on the left side of your screen is September 4th. And then here on the right side of your screen is September 9th. Now, according to Moon of Alabama, this area here is Russian-controlled in red along the Oskol River. In the middle area are railroad tracks and roads that connect the Izium region at the bottom of the map with the Orozovo in Russia. Now, you can see the difference between September 4th and this weekend. Look, kind of a big difference. There's a big bite taken out of the center of that, right?
Yeah.
So there was, in fact, a major offensive that occurred. It pushed forward and all to the river, by the way, and it captured the key town of Senkovo, which was a Russian-held town. So a major advancement by Ukrainian forces and NATO forces here in the blue. So here is a map. This is the Rybar map from Germany. Now, this is very important. So what we learned, of course, is that Western intelligence and NATO were absolutely 100% a pivotal player in this advancement up into this region, up into the river, okay? Western media reports were saying that Russia was running away and leaving their tanks and their armored vehicles. They were running in panic. There's zero evidence of that, by the way. The Washington Post quotes one villager who saw a Russian soldier drop a rifle before leaving town. Okay. That's the Washington Post.
In fact, now Zelensky is taking this opportunity to say, look, Russia is not even going to send anymore. Like, this was such a major offensive. We took back so much of our country. Russia's not even going to bother to send anybody back. They're not sending new troops, which is laughable because of how much they still control.
I mean, it's hilarious. So the Washington Post is getting this one report from one villager via Ukrainian sources.
Right.
So Washington Post doesn't have any reporters there. They're not getting this information from that villager themselves. Anyway, maybe it is true. Maybe all of these Russians just ran and panicked. There's no evidence. If you can show the evidence of that, we'd love to see it. By the way, George Galloway brought up a great point the other night. He tweeted this, and I thought this was so important because, I'm a student of history. I was a history major. You can watch so many videos of World War I. You can see countless hours. The other night, on whatever night I was watching a whole documentary on D-Day again. All this amazing footage, right?
Yeah.
And George Galloway said, maybe ask yourself the question, why can you watch more videos of World War I than you can of the Ukrainian war? Why? Why? Because journalists are not allowed to go anywhere near where the Ukrainian forces are. They're not allowed to. They don't want them there. They're being kept away. So we don't get any video of this. The only video we get are like drone footage stuff. We don't have any of the types of on-the-ground trench-style footage. And there's trenches all over eastern Ukraine.
And you know what that tells me? That tells me that what they're saying doesn't exist. Because if it was really happening the way that they say it is, there would be tons of footage. They would have reporters over there, and they would be reporting what was going on. But since that's not what's happening, they don't want you to know. Yeah.
So Western media reports saying that Russia was running away, leaving their tanks and stuff. In fact, it was a very fast moving move by the Russian forces to withdraw from this onslaught and regroup. And now Ukraine is surrounded. They moved so fast, Ukraine did, that they didn't have time to bring their artillery pieces, their heavy guns. And now armored Russian enforcements are coming from the north. They're coming from the east. And I want to be very clear about something. There are no English-speaking or Western media journalists in this region. In fact, that's something that Patrick Lancaster said the other day. He said, look, I have to go back. He's going to go back and start to cover again this area because you're not getting any reports. You're not getting any reports. If you get a report, you're getting it from Kiev, which is, you know how far away that is from the actual front and where this is all happening. So the only news of
only the Western media will tell you that Ukraine recaptured Kiev when the war was never there.
Right. And as we outlined here before, that was all, according to military strategists, it made perfect sense that you sneak around, pretend that you're going to take Kiev, and you draw all of the best of Ukraine's forces into that region, and then you completely move into the eastern Ukraine and swoop in and take that area, and then also take out a lot of their best forces, which is what they did in the early days. So when there was all this talk about a counteroffensive, they didn't have the people to pull it off. And so NATO and all of the Western media and all of the Western forces are figuring out what are they going to do. So they're training up people, sending them to Great Britain, sending them to Germany, sending them to Denmark, doing everything they can, increasing the conscription age. So instead of like being in the 30s, you could be 50 or 60 years old. and be a part of the Legion and be a part of the Foreign Legion and a part of the Ukrainian army. Ridiculous. So anyway, it's totally up to you if you want to believe these reports about panic and all of this stuff when there's literally no English-speaking journalists in that area covering this. So it's totally up to you. In fact, it's actually, so the only news of panic is being spread by Ukrainian Telegram social media channels and Twitter. And here are a few examples. You can believe them if you want. These are tweets and different Twitter accounts. Here are a few examples of these Ukrainian accounts that have all of a sudden, they all have something very similar in common. These are pro-Ukrainian Twitter accounts, all spreading fake news about this offensive, all located. Where are they all located? Langley, Virginia. I'm sure it's nothing.
There's a famous place there, isn't there? Langley, that rings a bell.
Yeah, Langley, Virginia. There's some government office? Is there some U.S. intelligence office in Langley, Virginia? I love how these people just joined Twitter in August of 2022, by the way. How convenient.
Right.
Right as we need propaganda online. Right?
Interesting.
So I'm sure it's nothing. I'm sure it's total coincidence. So if you're watching this show, you're smart enough to realize this is all propaganda and sensationalism, and the truth is buried somewhere in there. It's harder to surface. We're going to try to do that. We're going to try. The truth is yesterday's Russian withdrawal from the region between Izium and the Russian border was not good for Russia. Let me repeat. This was not good for Russia. Lest anyone say, you guys are Putin apologists. No, this was not good. This is not what they wanted at all. And it showed that they were spread too thinly across this wide range and didn't have enough forces to support that wide range. It kind of reminds in some ways of thinking of like D-Day. The reason we were on the move to fake out the Germans as much as we could on landing on Omaha Beach and so forth is because and trying to trick them into thinking that we were landing at the north, landing inflatable tanks and all sorts of other bullshit that we tried to pull, is to throw them off, to draw forces away. And then where we landed, they didn't have enough support behind the front two lines to support it, and we broke right through. That's what happened here. And so they were spread too thinly. Russia was spread way too thinly, and when they couldn't defend against Ukraine and NATO forces launching this attack, it's very hard to, by the way, it's very hard to defend against kamikaze suicide attacks. That's exactly what this was. NATO basically using Ukrainians as cannon fodder, throwing these people into it, and they know they're going to die. Like this is a kamikaze mission, and when you have nothing to lose and you're being thrown into it, it's very hard to defend against it. As Japanese Zeros are landing on battleships or smashing right into them, you can't get out of the way. They're going to land on the deck.
Then? That's such a hard sell. How do you make someone do this? Especially someone who's not military trained.
Well, I mean, that's the thing with propaganda is so strong. When you are told by your president Zelensky that this is going to be the thing that will win the war, there's money at the end of this. You're gonna be taken care of at the end of this. Like we're pushing you,
And you believe you're being a patriot.
Yeah. Or
country.
I go back to being a pig farmer, right? That's the other side of this. So what's my choice here?
Right.
So there's a heavy amount of propaganda in all of this, telling us the whole of Donetsk is now, the People's Republic is falling. You've been hearing this like over the weekend. Like Donetsk is falling. The Donbass is going to be reclaimed at any moment. It's ridiculous, which is more fake news. In fact, this afternoon we had an update from the press service of the People's Militia, the DPR, from Krasny Lyman. He said that the city is under full control and that the units of the Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic, as well as the Russian armed forces, have that area totally secured. Listen, you watch how peaceful
Город
it is.
Красный Лиман. Город полностью контролируется войсками народной милиции Донецкой Народной Республики, Луганской Народной Республики и подразделения Российской Федерации. В городе относительно спокойно. Противник не оставляет попыток атаковать прилегающие территории. Лиман не сдан. Лиман наш. И противник больше никогда не поднимет здесь свои флаги.
Стабильная обстановка в Красном Лимане. Что там пишут вам в интернете, это все фейки. Вот мы здесь, мы стоим, все нормально. Противник пытается прорваться, да, но мы удержим оборону. А мы не даем ему пройти сюда. Держим дальше линию обороны, отражаем огонь противника.
I love that they don't have their own word for fake. like he used the word fake because it's an English word. Like we made that one up. That's ours.
Yeah, blah, 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 blah. Propaganda.
It's but a little fake.
Fake.
Internetsky fake. Like, yeah, I can see where that one was inspired.
McDonald's.
You don't have to search very hard in the Greek origin of that word.
Yeah, that's true. So he went on to say that their fighters are at their combat posts, successfully repelling all enemy attacks. This was actually video of Donetsk. If you want to show this, Philip, this was where they had tried to mount a small-scale attack. Russian armor moved right in and just basically leveled them overnight. So again, this is near Donetsk and totally secured that area. So meanwhile, the Western media is calling this Ukrainian attack a game changer. This is literally what they're calling it. Here is the Washington Examiner. After 200 days of war, the tide has turned in Ukraine's favor. Greatest counteroffensive since World War II, they say. Military experts are gushing over Ukraine's stunning military advances over the past 72 hours. On and on and on. Ukraine has launched its greatest counteroffensive. And then here's John Spencer. In case you're still not informed, so I guess he's talking to all you guys, right? If you're watching right now. In case you guys are just still not informed, Ukraine has launched the greatest counteroffensive since World War II. By the way, he tweeted this about himself, like third person.
I was just about to call him out on that. Like how could you end it with exclaimed? Like it should just say exclaimed me.
I'm going to do that from now. I'm going to tweet. I had the best day of my life! Exclaimed Clayton Morris.
Clayton likes this.
On my Clayton. Yeah, it's like George is getting angry. Talking in third person.
I think you should do I think you should like mix it up a bit and say claimed I. Give it a bit of spice.
Thus saith me.
Thus saith me. Like he was tweeting an article about what he had said, but okay, like he could just say anyway, I just had to call them out. So he says this is the greatest counteroffensive since World War II. Let's unpack that a little bit. So what he's actually saying here is that this is equal to the final death throes of Germany in World War II at the Battle of the Bulge specifically. Here's video of the Battle of the Bulge. Freezing conditions in the
we have this? Interesting.
Yeah, well, we have footage of World War II, but you can't find footage of the Ukraine war. You can't. Like, this is literally freezing temperatures where these guys had trench foot and frozen. They couldn't even light fires to keep warm because Germans would see their fires and bomb their positions. This is the Battle of the Bulge, also known as the Ardennes Offensive, was the last major offensive campaign of the Western Front during World War II. It was a disaster. It was really a bloody, bloody mess, but it was the last death throes. It was called the Battle of the Bulge because Germans created a bulge around the area of the Ardennes forest and pushed through the American defensive line. It was a last-ditch effort of the force. It was bloody. It was awful. The German losses were tremendous. They used their last best forces here in the Ardennes. They were used in this battle, and they lost. Most major wars have these moments. Total disaster. I was thinking of this afternoon. I was thinking of Pickett's Charge. If you've ever been to Gettysburg.
Do we have video of that?
Wouldn't that be amazing? We can't get video of Ukraine, but we have Civil War video. Here's Abraham. We're going to listen to, we have a soundbite of Abraham Lincoln talking about.
We have a depiction.
Pickett's Charge at the Battle of Gettysburg during the American Civil War. Pickett's Charge, George Pickett. It was his last-ditch infantry attack against the Union soldiers at Gettysburg on the third day, on July 3rd, 1863. It was the beginning of the end of the Confederate forces. They all gathered around that cusp of trees in the middle of the field. If you've ever been to Gettysburg, you know where those trees are. It's amazing to stand there and think, like, this was the death right here. You're watching the Confederacy in that last throes of Pickett's Charge right there. But I actually have a better battle I thought of today, thinking about this. During the Pyrrhic War, when the forces of Pyrrhus threw everything it had at the Roman Empire, they won the battle. Of course, you know this, right, from your history, but they lost every good soldier they had. It was a devastating win. Like, think about that, right? They threw everything they had at, and they lost everybody. And the Romans won the war. It's known as a Pyrrhic victory, of course, right? You win the battle, but you lose so much that there's nothing left. And that's what we're seeing right here. We're seeing the last throes of this and being forced by NATO into this mess. So a few minor things to wrap up here on this point. Over the past few hours, we saw total blackouts across Ukraine because up until now, Russia has not hit their infrastructure. So people have had the lights on.
They haven't, and they could have all along.
All along, especially when...
We know they did in 2017. They basically turned off their internet.
Yeah, with like one night in a cyber attack, they just shut everything off. They shut the electric grid down.
For shits and giggles.
And not just their internet. They shut down their electric grid. They shut down everything. They didn't have heat.
They made it so you couldn't even literally turn on your computer. Not just not get online, but not even turn it on.
Yeah.
People just kind of down, they don't think about is that if Russia wanted to, they could decimate Ukraine. Like they could completely just decimate Ukraine.
Yeah.
And it could be off the map if they wanted to.
Well, think about the railway lines, right? They've kept them intact. And when Ukraine when transporting on their electric rail lines, they were transporting Western weapons across their electric rail lines to use to attack Russians. Even then, Russia didn't attack the electric rail lines. So now, overnight, shutting down blackouts. A friend of ours said the lights were shut out and they came back on about 3 a.m, but they were off all night. Power was out all night, and it's still not winter yet, right? So imagine what happens when now Russia really wants to mount an offensive. So there are rumors swirling today that Russia is on the verge of saying, forget this idea of the special military operation that we've been calling it, and now escalating it to calling it an open war with Ukraine. So I'm telling you, those guys that are trapped right now in the bulge in the middle there, they are in for a rude awakening. And I mean, we'll see. Again, no one can predict the future. But if history is any guide, and if military battles are any guide, this is going to be devastating for the what's left of the Ukrainian army and NATO forces, by the way.
And Russia continues to offer for peace talks, right? And the Donbass in the eastern region is just off the table. People there, many people want that to be the case, want to remain as part of Russia. Many have taken up the opportunity to get passports, right? So we're not saying the way it should be, but these peace talks can happen now without any other lives being lost. Or we can continue to support sending in money and troops and people's lives in Ukraine, hoping for what? Maybe more Pyrrhic victories or more 1.6% victories. I don't know, but it will cost lives, right? While the rest of us go on with ours.
Well, we've got more news to get here on the show. We're going to talk about these FBI raids on MAGA supporters. Unbelievable story that we're going to bring you in just a moment. We're also going to talk about the Biden administration's attack on cryptocurrency because they're scared. As we have a declining U.S. dollar, Western currencies are plummeting, and they're getting desperate. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to look at the legacy of the 9/11 attacks and the stuff that they won't tell you about these 9/11 attacks. You don't want to miss that. We're going to talk about all of that and more.
Well, former Trump campaigns...
Okay.
Oh, what?
Sorry.
Okay.
Real quick, sorry. Before we move on, Clayton, can you check the main camera and make sure it's not on spot focus? Because you guys are slightly blurry on this shot.
I see that.
I think it's because Natalie's too far away. That could be why.
Hang on, guys.
How do you do that?
Well, so on the back of the camera, you need to push the dial, the button in the middle of it, because it's like, I think it got bumped onto spot focus because it looks like the background's in focus.
Okay.
You got to get up.
Sorry.
We'll do that in a second. I'll take care of it in a second. Okay.
Shall we?
Yeah.
Okay. Want to tell you about some stuff. Let's do it. Click, click, click. Okay. Former Trump campaign frontman Steve Bannon is accusing the FBI of raiding Trump supporters as a political tactic. Now, he hasn't said exactly who these people are, so what the heck is going on here? Let's let him say it on conservative forum, The Charlie Kirk Show. Listen.
They just reported a couple names. There were 35 senior members of MAGA, Republicans, supporters of Donald Trump, that were the FBI rolled in on. Right? When they didn't need to do it. Remember, all these people have lawyers. All their lawyers are very well known. No. The jackbooted Gestapo has got to show up at their door and make a big display of this. So there's so much going on that people don't even know at so many levels.
Steve, can you reiterate that? You said there were 35 FBI raids yesterday. I consider myself well-read. I didn't see that anywhere. Can you elaborate on that?
I've been reported. I'm breaking that news right here. If you go to the Washington Post story, 35 FBI went to 35 years. All these people have lawyers. They all know who the lawyers are. They didn't serve these subpoenas to the lawyers. They want to make a big display of it. They want to take a bunch of their devices. This is the FBI trying to roll in and trying to be muscle.
All right. Now, this was last Friday, the same day that he was arraigned on charges of fraud around raising money to support the Trump campaign around election fraud, right? He calls this a way that the Justice Department is now turning up the heat on enemies of President Biden. Now, a lawyer for some of these 35 people, by some media reports, it's upwards of 50 people.
I see people in the chat saying, yeah, now it's 50 people being rounded up.
So a lawyer, her name is Dylan. She confirmed this on Tucker Carlson later this day. Listen.
What is the truth?
Well, the truth is that a few days ago, a political reporter called several people and said, hey, have you heard or have you been served yet? The FBI is going to be serving 50 approximately search warrants and or subpoenas on Trump supporters. And then, within 24 hours of that, three of our clients actually did either get search warrants or subpoenas. And these subpoenas are extremely broad. They're from the Capitol Siege section of the United States Department of Justice's D.C. office. And they ask for broad categories of documents. They ask for all communications dating from a month before the election until 2 months after the election. And they ask for all communications regarding dozens of people. And the categories are alternate electors, fundraising around irregularities around the election, and also a rally that happened before the January 6th situation at the Capitol, so the Save America rally that happened. And so basically most of this activity, if not all of it, is protected by the First Amendment. And the United States Department of Justice is telling reporters about these search warrants and subpoenas before they're executed. There's no other explanation for this. And I think the reason for this is to instill fear into Donald Trump supporters and into those who would challenge election irregularities right before an upcoming election, Tucker. So this is really outrageous abuse by the DOJ, and it is illegal for the DOJ to leak this information to the media, Tucker.
All right, so what the heck is this about, right?
It's crazy.
Given that we don't really know the names of who was raided or who was subpoenaed, so we can't draw connections other than the themes that she tells us. So have you fundraised around the legitimacy of the election, right? Have you participated in any riots or demonstrations around the legitimacy of the election? Have you communicated with anybody around January 6th, right? We know that only one of her clients is called Women for America First, and they were among this group that was targeted.
But she's right, though. How is this not protected under the First Amendment? Like, if you've had conversations with people and you believe that whatever, we're not going to say it on this channel because I know YouTube will take us down, right? But the legitimacy of election, right? If you've talked about it, or if you've had conversations about it and you've had support groups about it, or you've fundraised about it, like, they're coming to your house?
But look, Bannon was indicted with something around illegal fundraising, what they're calling illegal fundraising around the election, right?
Right.
And so if you can pin anything to him, right, you were fundraising around this notion, and the way that it's not that he wasn't allowed to do it. You can fundraise on a political belief. It was what they're saying has to do with how he actually funneled the money indirectly to himself, right? Those are the allegations. So you can look at those things. But I think what's interesting, right, is that earlier this year, Attorney General Merrick Garland warned that we would start to see more movement on people who were connected with January 6th soon. So now, is that happening because the Justice Department has just, like, the wheels of justice turned slow and they're trying to get it right? Or, here's my more cynical question, is it because an election is coming up? Right?
Right.
That is the question. We shouldn't jump to conclusions, but we should ask this question, right? It's hard to say. This is something that conservatives obviously could use to feed their already inflamed attitude about the FBI, right? So is this then just another reason? So I'm looking at the extreme cases, right? are conservatives using this to rile up their base against the FBI, or are Democrats weaponizing this event, but they took 2 years to do it because they've got an election, right?
Right.
And so I don't think that this is necessarily another reason to be upset with the FBI. Just a few weeks ago, former Attorney General Bill Barr went on Barry Weiss' podcast, Honestly, and he explained that the FBI actually doesn't make these decisions about raiding politicians. They're kind of like the hired gun, right? It's the Justice Department that does this. So this is what he said about the raid on President Trump's house. Listen to what he said.
Well, the first thing is, I think a lot of the attacks on the FBI are over the top because a decision like this is not going to be made by the FBI. And in fact, I don't think the FBI would come and pound the table pushing a decision like this. In this kind of situation, the decision that it's best to go in and search and obtain those documents after being jerked around for a year and a half, and that's the way the department would look at it, would be made at the Department of Justice by subordinates of the AG and ultimately signed off on by the AG. And the FBI would be told to go and execute it. So all this idea that the FBI is the problem here, I think it's misplaced. That's number one.
Okay. I am not pro-Trump. I am not pro-anything, right? So stop it in the chat.
Kenneth is like, but she's a never-Trumper. And other people are like, she's pro-Trump. I'm
not pro-Trump. I'm not pro-Democrat. I'm asking questions. I also saw that you're a sheep. Oh, yes, and I'm a sheep. So I know it's
Stop being so
funny.
pro-Trump.
We're asking important questions, right? No matter what you want the outcome to be, we have to ask these questions. So Bill Barr goes on to say that really this is the Justice Department, right? It's not the FBI that's deciding to go and raid people. The Justice Department is. Mm-hmm. That may not make us feel any better, right? Because he's saying, what? Did you?
No, he was playing the song.
I thought you were throwing the video.
Oh, okay. Well, hang on one second. He's saying that some people inside the Justice Department are actually politically motivated, and they decide to let's go,
Thanks,
we
Captain
feel
Obvious.
about this. In fact, he said, Mueller got his investigation so wrong because he hired politically motivated investigators that Mueller himself may not have been, but almost all of the people working on it, which I think he's right about. Now, he doesn't think Christopher Wray, the acting FBI director, is one of those people who's politically motivated, but it almost doesn't matter if there are political motivations in the Justice Department, right? So he's saying some people are, some people are not.
Wait a minute, it doesn't matter if there's political motivations in the Justice Department?
Because what he's saying is that the FBI is just the hired gun, right?
Oh, I see.
It's the Justice Department that
starts it.
That's deciding we're going to investigate this, right? And the FBI makes their investigations.
Well, I think it's incredibly ignorant for him to say that it's not important because we saw there was people fired from the FBI recently because of their political rants about Trump, right? So why did they fire them then if it wasn't important?
You're right.
And why didn't Barry Weiss follow up Bill Barr with that question?
She does. She said this is incredibly unsatisfying answer because you're saying, there's some politically motivated investigations going on, but some of them actually are just trying to do their job and do it right. And she's like, that sucks. Like, how do we know what to believe? How can we not say we don't believe this, right? But what's undeniable is that these things are happening and are shifting the advantage to the Democrats. Listen to him say that.
The main reason I'm sort of irritated at the whole episode is because it actually strengthens Biden and hurts the Republican Party going into the midterms. I think one of the reasons people sort of sense a little bit of loss of momentum, we'll all see how it turns out, but is because the focus has once again returned to President Trump and his persona and his modus operandi instead of the pocketbook issues that had been the focus before.
Right. So Democrats love it, right? Because Trump is so easy to rally on opposition for. Right. They can rally their base, not based on what are the actual issues, which are inflation, global politics, gas, energy, all of these things.
How am I going to pay my rent?
No, it doesn't matter, right? We got another Trump thing to hate. So let's all get to the point, to the polls, right? We can't answer, even though there's then
it literally does fall. I mean, it falls in line with what they hope to accomplish, right? Which is to demonize demonize President Trump, demonize MAGA supporters just in time. You don't come out in Philadelphia with that crazy red speech last week without a purpose, without a reason. It's all politically timed. People are going back to school. People start paying attention to politics after Labor Day.
Yeah.
Right? This is when people are starting to become more engaged. This is when political campaigns heat up. They spend a bulk of their money right now into the fall ahead of the November election. Right. August, it's quiet. It's all calculated. Of course they're doing this on purpose.
Yes, and it is what Barr, before he took the office of Attorney General, he was really concerned about this idea of the expansion of the administrative state, right? Listen to how Barry Weiss explains this really terrifying thing that does feel like it's what's happening right now.
In other words, that the muscles and mechanisms of the government were being used, at least in part, by people to carry out a political witch hunt against a president they didn't like.
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
Much of the GOP base believes this. Many conservatives I know believe this, and understandably so. And so then they look at a day like the search in Mar-a-Lago and say, this is just further evidence of exactly that. How can you, Bill Barr, who have said, Russiagate wasn't real and these investigations and that all of it was sort of trumped up and shouldn't have really happened in the first place, why should we now believe you that this search and the subpoena of Cipollone are justified?
I didn't say they were, I haven't reached the conclusion on that until I get the information I said. But what happened in Russiagate essentially created the condition where people are going to think the worst.
Exactly.
And not give the FBI or the Justice Department the benefit of the doubt.
So what do you say to conservatives?
Sorry. So why should we, though, at this point, right? When there's just so much of this expansion of the administrative state. That's exactly what we were warned about in 1994. So this phrase, the capture of the rise of the administrative state, comes from a 1994 Harvard Law Review article in which Professor Gary Lawson warned that the administrative process of rulemaking, investigation, enforcement, and adjudication violate the Constitution and the rights it guarantees by concentrating legislative, executive, and judicial powers within a single entity, the administrative agency. So he says this is unconstitutional because it violates the principles of limited and separate governmental power. And when it happens, then these administrative agencies turn into political weapons.
Well, we've seen this with the IRS, right? We've seen this with the Department of Homeland Security. David, who was it? The post office that has armed agents now? Who else is armed? All of these arms of the executive branch, right? The post office is an executive branch. The IRS
is what I...
Yeah, the IRS...
Department of Education.
But
the
not
Department
just
of Education.
Arming, with guns, we're talking about weaponizing.
Well, even the IRS, forget the gun part of it for a second, right? That's scary and that's sensational and that kind of makes headlines. But when the IRS has 87,000 agents now that are going to audit and go after poor and middle class Americans, or as we know, as we've talked about this on the show, Lois Lerner and Nicole Flax, who were in charge of basically going after conservative groups under Obama, targeting conservative groups.
Yes, this is true.
That the IRS later apologized for and tacitly acknowledged that they were doing this. Like, that's weaponizing these different departments.
Right. And now we see just information being weaponized, right? Like through social media companies and that kind of thing. Of course, right? But the thing that sort of gives me pause in all of this is, does it help to become inflamed about this and say, this is a witch hunt, it continues to hunt more witches? Or is there a better way, right? Because both sides now are so inflammatory and feeding themselves outrage that what do we do with that, right? So listen to what he, because this leads to the blow it all up conversation that we see on the web.
Tear it all
abolish
down.
The FBI, abolish, the Supreme Court, and so when we go that route, then what are we left with? Is there really anyone's going to be like, great, we have no country. Let's build from the bottom up. Tink, 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 right? We're not going to do that. We have to somehow live with what we've got. Listen to what former AG Bill Barr says about that.
Well, what's the alternative? My message to all these people, something I'm pretty tired of from from the right is the constant pandering to outrage and frustrate people's frustrations and picking and picking and picking at that sore without trying to channel those feelings in a constructive direction. In my opinion, Ronald Reagan was a great populist, not because he followed, the frustrated instincts and the outrage of many people who supported him, but because he channeled it.
So right now we are living on this steady diet of outrage. And so I think about this all the time when we plan out this show. Like, does it help to just make people mad without any kind of, I don't know.
Antidote.
Or empowered piece of it or anything like that. Like, if we we could build a really like hornet's nest type of audience on YouTube. And a lot of people have a lot of success doing that, right? But does it help to just be a hornet's nest? I was thinking about a piece I read today about the royal family. And of course, there's this conversation on the internet and elsewhere about, do we even need a monarchy, right? Is this just all a charade? What's this all worth? But there is this sort of collective good in having a piece of your society that is completely nonpartisan. That is unarguably a good thing. Does it have to be represented by a person? I don't know. Could it maybe be represented by a plush bear or a national food? Yes, this is where I was going to. Like a sandwich? I don't know. I don't know if it has to be a human, because there is sort of this like, Kate Middleton is better than me because, I don't know, she married that guy and I married this guy, although I think I got the better end of that deal. So someone in the chat said, she's great, he's okay. No, he's more than okay. So the idea is, right, is there something that we can just stop completely being outraged about? This story that we started with, maybe not it, right? The story. Is there something we stop being outraged about? Is there something like this continued inflammation of both sides is very destructive? And when we see the administrative state playing into this, it's further destructive. So then what? I don't know, right? I don't know what this neutral thing is. Can you take the United States to marriage counseling? It's like, yes, that is the question. But at the end of the day, when you literally have two sides that this is what they want, because I really believe like the deep state is the problem here. So you can have MAGA, you can have these guys over here on the left, and you can try to find some common ground, and we often can. Yeah. But when you literally have a deep state underneath all of that, that's moving you in a direction that you have no control over anyway, right? Then you're fighting a losing battle. Because you're never going to make change when you literally have a massive force working against you. And that's what we have. We have a deep state. I personally felt like the inflation that we're dealing with would unite us and be we would find a common enemy, because we have the same enemy. We just see it as two different things. And it's like, I figured like this inflation would get us all together because it's affecting every single one of us, both sides. Yeah. But we disagree on why it's happening, right? Because both sides of this government, because Republicans and Democrats continue to print money. The old joke is that, I'm going to get in there, I'm going to shrink the size of government. I'm Ronald Reagan, I'm going to shrink the size of government. No, you didn't. I'm George Bush, I'm going to shrink the size of government. No, you didn't. You massively expanded it. I'm Bill Clinton, I'm going to shrink the size of government. No, you didn't. You expanded it. No, they always pay lip service. No one has shrunk the federal government ever. So, it's not going to happen. Bill Barr goes on to say, you need to legitimately, win elections and then make policy changes. That's how we fight, right? I'm not sure I feel that way anymore, but both sides keep fighting with cheap shots, right? So could it be that these are politically motivated, investigations that are inappropriate? Yes, absolutely, that could be the case. But Republicans do those kind of things too, to sort of give themselves PR advantages in the run-up of elections. Well, Republicans are amazing at gerrymandering districts. And both sides are sort of fighting cheap. Republicans are much better at gerrymandering districts. So you literally have like political districts that look like they like a fish hook. They shouldn't even be like, how does a human being live like that? They don't. And so Republicans are much better at that. Yes. And so, at this point, I don't know, I really don't know. I just don't want to like feed into this. Let's all be outraged and then have nothing to do with that. I don't know if I succeeded.
No, I mean, I think
giving you any other outlet for that energy.
We've got to stop fighting each other. That's one thing, right? Stop fighting each other and realize that this deep state hegemony, these forever politicians who are there permanently, these, Dr. Fauci's of the world who are there for 40 years, and, these unelected individuals who just stay in this permanent government state, like that's what we need to focus on. I mean, and how can we as a country come together? There's 100 million people that do not vote, right? In the United States, 100 million people do not vote. Imagine if those people could come together and we could actually lead, a revolution at the voting bowl, at the ballot box, to make a change. So,
well, in my personal opinion, it's 100% money. If you could eventually get money out of politics, you would not incentivize people to get into office to become wealthy, because you have people that know this, so they work their butts off to get into it, to establish power and to set themselves up for the rest of their lives. If you got rid of super PACs, you made lobbying illegal, you made it illegal for them to trade stocks, their families and everything, and did not let them enrich themselves while they were in office, you would get people that went in for the right reasons. Because I think that everybody that's going into it right now is not going into it for the right reasons to help people. They're going in it to enrich their lives.
Yes, that was the whole platform of Lawrence Lessig when he ran for president in 2016. And it was just a little too complicated. People did not want to pay attention to that. They only want to be riled up with the 2-second sound bites. I mean, he has a whole book, which is fabulous, called Republic Lost. You should read it. But most people won't, right? Because we're too busy with our 140 characters, or how many are we allowed now?
280
280 now on Twitter?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, that's the most we can handle. But if we were to actually pay attention, I'm lecturing the converted here, because if you are, 56 minutes into a show like this, you are willing to pay attention to the complicated issues, but maybe tell your friends to read more, read less Twitter, read more books.
Yeah, maybe vote for Ron Paul. If everyone would have got on board and maybe voted for these people, that we could have had major change. But the problem is these two-party systems push these people out. So we've got more news to get to here on the show. We're going to talk about President Biden going up against crypto and what that means for the financial system. We're also going to talk about the legacy of the 9/11 attacks and talk about the things you're not allowed to talk about, the things that are buried, kept hidden about the 9/11 attacks. And we've got so much more. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Audible. Now, I love Audible. I listen just about every day when I'm taking Grover on a nice walk. I pop in an audiobook and I listen. I've been an Audible subscriber for, I think, a decade now. And my kids, when they're on the bus...
You actually voiced a book.
I did. Yes, I have a book myself. I actually did the voice. You can actually get it for free if you want to pay off your mortgage in 5 years. Natalie and I wrote a book called How to Pay Off Your Mortgage in 5 Years. It's a financial book, so you can check it out. You can get it for free, by the way. You can try Audible for free for 30 days if you text the word redacted to 500-500, and you'll get it free for 30 days. As an Audible member, you can choose one title a month to keep for your entire catalog, including the latest bestsellers and their new releases. All Audible members get access to a growing selection of audiobooks, Audible originals, podcasts. They're included with memberships as well. You can listen all you want. Even the Redacted podcast is on Audible. You can listen to it. Really love how the app works. I love working with it on my Apple Watch. So if I'm out and about and I don't have my phone, I don't use it on my phone, I just put it on my Apple Watch and I just put on my headphones and I walk, and it's all streaming right there, and it all syncs back very, very seamlessly. You can change the speed, so if you want to listen to an author a little bit more quickly or a little slower, you can do that. It's really, really great. They have an incredible selection of audiobooks across every genre, from bestsellers to new releases to celebrity memoirs to mysteries, and my favorite are thrillers. Motivation, wellness, business, the like of it. So let Audible help you discover new ways to laugh, be inspired, be entertained. New members can try it for free for 30 days. Visit audible.com/redacted or text the word redacted to 500-500. Just try it for free for 30 days and get a free book. You can get my book that we wrote, and I voice it. So if you like my dulcet tones, it's my voice on the audiobook. That's audible.com/redacted or text the word redacted 500-500. Try Audible for free for 30 days. Audible.com/redacted. And thank you for all of your subscribes. We really appreciate it. We passed 1 million subscribers last week. We're almost at like 1.4 or 1.04. Now that we're in that 1.04 million subscribers
that
here on
would be
Redacted.
super fast.
So thank you to all of you who are subscribers of our channel and seeking the truth along with us. We always say we don't have all the
now
answers.
we can say thank you, you 1.04 awakening wonders.
Yes.
Yes, just like our friend Russell.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes.
right.
And I think, he has a good message about the world. Like we don't have all the answers, and we are, by watching this information, by seeking the truth, looking for the truth outside of the Western media that tell us what to think, the BBC, CNNs, the MSNBCs of the world. We are awakened. We are awakening. We're trying to get answers and finding solutions to problems together. So I like that message.
We're so grateful for you, because talking like this, we don't make many friends in the real world. People run from us.
By the way, I have a story coming up about the 9/11 attacks, which will get you kicked out of private conversations with family and friends if you go to dinner invitations at people's houses. So yes, it's not going to make you any friends to talk about what we talk about here.
But
on the
we're
show.
all friends. We have each other.
What is that? What is that word you keep using? That friends? What is that?
Friends.
You are mine.
Yes, we're friends.
So just so you know. Yeah. I mean, I don't have any friends like in my real life.
Why the hell is this
You
camera
got
not
a friend
getting
in me.
Why is this not
Put it in more in the middle, in the center.
center of what?
Use your other hand, your right hand.
Yeah. All right. The camera's not. It's just like not focusing tonight on. I don't know what's
So
happening
it's
here.
like the spot focus is turned off. We're going to turn that on manual after the show, and we're going to dial it in.
It is on manual, I think, isn't it? Anyway.
It's like how the, actresses, when they age, they only use the blurry cameras. Maybe because I had a birthday recently.
Yeah, we put on. Then we got to really change this camera. We got to change this one to soft focus too.
No.
Well, I was going to say today that your hair, you look like you're probably like 25 today.
Oh, thanks. I guess.
She is 44, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 44 years old. People think she's like 12.
Yes,
Yeah,
I am.
She's 44 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I am not youth obsessed, so I'm fine to talk
I want you to
about
send me every food you eat.
Gary says, you guys look fine, but David looks awful. Yeah, David, what's up with your camera? You look like, I'm going to call you 8-bit Dave.
I don't know. It's been doing this for the past, I've got it on 4,000. Like it should be really good, but it's not. So I don't know. And I've got I did a speed test. I got 1,000 over 1,000. So I'm good here. So
I'm just glad it's
I don't know what
you.
it is.
I'm just glad it's
it.
you
It
and
makes
not
your
my
face
internet.
super,
Me too.
you look like a snowman.
Yeah, he looks like a pixelated
Are you
snowman.
recording everything Are you streaming through a Nokia? That's what it looks like.
Are you using a hotspot?
That's what it looks like.
Yeah. All right.
All right, ready? Next story? Here we go. All right. On Wednesday, Russian President Vladimir Putin will meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping in person for the first time since the pandemic. This meeting will take place in Uzbekistan, and there are people in the West that would prefer that these two not be friends. So everyone will be watching this meeting with a microscope. Imagine how badly Western powers would love to put some kind of tracker or something inside of here, right? This is the thing. This is the meeting, guys. We are going to put our ear to the railroad tracks. Is that
listen? Yeah, I'd love to be a fly on that wall and listen to that meeting.
Now, in the terms of the Cold War, this meeting is red hot because the United States risks being cut out of a lot of money of global currency if these two nations get too chummy. The Cold War, we want to remind you, is all about the default currency, right? What currency does international trade happen on right now? It is the US dollar. But that is by no means a sure thing. It's sort of teetering on the brink. Now, China would very much like to pay for gas and other things from OPEC nations on the petro yuan. I say that wrong all the time. Petro yuan. Russia is now accepting payments for oil and gas on the ruble. So how many other nations will sort of get the idea that they can stop paying currency transfers to pay for all their oil and gas if the U.S. cannot keep its stronghold? Now, incidentally, I've been reading this book. I brought my homework with me. It's called The Hidden Hand of American Hegemony, and it is about how the United States actually won the sort of big prize of being the global currency. The author David Spiro talks about how America got this stronghold to begin with. And he says, I'm going to just give you a little historical context. In 1974, U.S. Treasury Secretary William Simon negotiated a secret deal with the Saudi Central Bank so that they could buy U.S. Treasury securities outside of the normal auction. A few years later, Treasury Secretary Michael Blumenthal cut a secret deal with the Saudis so that OPEC would continue to price oil in dollars. These deals were secret because the United States had promised other industrialized democracies that it would not pursue such unilateral positions. But it happened. In fact, he talks a lot about petrodollar recycling, how the United States continues to make money through. It's a bit complicated, but worth reading. Incidentally, this book is out of print. I had to order it. It's about 15 years old. So, okay. But the West would have you believe that anything that removes the US dollar as the global currency is evil, is nefarious, right? Because this is the way it should be. Listen to this one consultant tell Face the Nation what we need to believe about China.
Let's start with, what is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization?
It's an organization that Russia and China focus on to try to balance power away from the Western world and focus more on their relationship, countries in the region. Some of what they do is benign, but some of it, I would argue, is more nefarious.
Nefarious.
He says that with a little
yeah, it's very nefarious. They're getting together, and these guys are going to talk about how they're going to bring down the U.S. dollar. It's nefarious.
Right. To you. I mean, that's another word for undesirable. Right.
Well, and also, can I just say, when you talked about the U.S. dollar and you talked about oil, I mean, what a lot of people don't know is that oil historically has not been volatile because it was tied to gold. And the why oil became so volatile is because it became tied to the dollar.
Yes.
So the U.S. dollar is the fluctuating problem, not oil itself.
Right. It's amazing to me that guy got booked on Face the Nation.
Well, it's not Face the Nation. It was CBS Primetime.
But even so, one of CBS Primetime marquee shows, they book this guy who's a consultancy aimed at helping businesses stop Chinese influence. Like,
did they disclose that?
Well, they say
who he is and what company he works for.
Right.
But they don't say your company specifically hates China. We're going to get a good reference point on you now, so you can provide some context about this meeting between. This is what the Western media does, guys. They don't tell you their connections.
But I worked for CBS. I can't imagine that guy getting booked by any booker that I had ever worked with. I don't know how that happens.
Or do you think it just flies under the radar? Like, we have a guy, he's a consultant for a think tank in Washington.
Because remember, there were some pieces that we did even around CES, which is a consumer electronics show, and there were guests on who also had sponsorship deals, and they had to say, this contributor also has is a spokesperson for Cadillac or whatever.
No, it was Kodak. It was a Kodak. It was a person who was like getting money from Kodak, and then she was going to come on CBS to talk about cameras, and CBS was like, no. We can't have like a person coming on talking about cameras who's also getting money from Kodak.
So we disclosed it when we brought her on the show, right?
But that didn't stop them from bringing her on the show. They still brought her on the show. They just had to say that she's a contributor. She's a paid whatever from Kodak.
Who also, even so, just the idea that this guy got this marquee shot to talk about China tells you how... This, to me, that's unconscionable. Okay. So, of course, this guy, he doesn't want Chinese currency to expand its reach. Now, am I saying that it would be better that the yuan is the global currency or the ruble? I'm not saying that. But I am saying that cryptocurrencies and blockchains could make it possible to have no global currency backed by any nation state, which is why I think the West is especially scared of it. This week, the Biden administration released a report saying that crypto mining operations could get in the way of climate change efforts, and that, we're going to have to do something about that. Crypto miners for the planet. Right?
So we got to stop all these carbon emissions for all the crypto mining. So, because
not just because they happen to not like it and it threatens their hegemony, but for the planet. Okay. So what is the administration saying? They're saying that crypto miners use a lot of energy.
Right.
And all that energy usage is driving up carbon emissions, and that will kill you, basically. Read their summary here. It says these climate-driven damages include deaths, right? You're going to die
Caused
from
by
crypto.
heat waves. So crypto is causing heat waves?
Loss of forest, homes, and infrastructure, wildfires, flooding, extreme weather events, property loss, damage to roads, bridges, public transit systems, and the energy system, inundation of coastal areas by sea level rise, storm surges, droughts, damage to crops, and other harms of the ecosystem that sustain people. All that will happen if we go to cryptocurrency, right? So this is them establishing.
Dogs and cats lying together.
Right.
Yeah. Mass hysteria.
I'm so glad you didn't talk me into buying that stuff, Clayton.
I know, my God. Property loss, droughts. You would be dealing with a drought if you were a crypto miner. Droughts and famine, wildfires.
Right. Okay, so they're establishing that carbon emissions will harm us all, which is true. Rising carbon emissions will have a net negative effect on humanity. Let's all agree on that. The degree of it, we don't agree on. That's okay, right? We can all say we don't want more damage to the planet. So then should we give the government then the power to choose what stays and what goes and trust that they will make the decision for us all? That's a LOL, right?
Right.
So here we have evidence that they are not doing that. They are choosing winners and losers based on what's good for them and using climate change as an excuse. Here is what they say further, that as of August 2022, published estimates of the total global global electricity usage for crypto assets are between 120 and 240 billion kilowatt hours per year. Now, this is according to published estimates. They didn't do their own analysis. They just this is a wide range. It's double, right? And they're saying this exceeds the total annual electricity usage of many individual countries, like Argentina or Australia. Okay, but one study put out last year of Bitcoin alone shows that Bitcoin uses about 113 billion kilowatt hours. So the government's saying that cryptocurrency in general is between 120 and 240. And this study is saying that Bitcoin alone is about 113. So let's say 240 is an extreme exaggeration, okay? And let's just pretend, for the sake of argument, that it is closer to 120, 150. Fine. How is that electricity consumed? Well, you can see here, the energy use comes from the nodes that validate and relay transactions, the pools that coordinate miners' activity around the world, and the mining machines themselves. That's not the one do you have the chart? That one, yes. So that is a breakdown of how this energy is used, right?
Okay.
But how does that compare to traditional banking?
I mean, like going to Bank of America or...
Traditional banking, you got a checkbook, you got a credit card, you got an ATM card, you go to the ATM, right?
I don't know. I'm going to say, let me just take a gander, because if you lived in New York City, you would drive down, you see like the Bank of America building.
Yeah.
You'd see the Citibank building, these massive buildings with electricity and computers and thousands of employees riding elevators and stuff, and banking centers all over, all the ATMs, right? And brick and mortar banks all over the place. If you want to go to a PNC bank or a Bank of America bank, there's branches everywhere, right? I'm going to say, I don't know, at least on par or maybe even more. Double crypto.
Yes. Traditional banking produces about 240 billion kilowatt hours per year compared to our conservative estimates of 120 or 150 for cryptocurrency. Now, this is probably conservative because the banking industry does not report its electricity consumption. They don't have to. The government could give a shit.
Right.
No, the government's not asking. They do not care. They do care about cryptocurrency. That's interesting, right? So traditional banking has to run banking centers, which are, of course, very energy intensive. They also have to run branches, ATMs, card network data centers. They have to collect physical cash in those armored cars. You use a bank, you understand, right? What about gold? Actually, gold is nearly as energy consumptive as banking. Bitcoin, interestingly enough, is about the most eco-friendly way to bank or move your money. But the government cannot control it. They cannot even get a straight read on who owns it. That's the problem.
Right. They want the control. Yes.
Right. In a world where Western leaders like to unbank people when they are dissenters, I'm talking to you, Darth Trudeau, right?
Right.
So to be fair, China doesn't like the idea of cryptocurrency either. Most governments don't. Go ahead, Philip. What were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say, but the difference here is that the government hasn't done a study like this on banks that say banks are going to blow up the world, kill you, you're going to die, you're going to drown, you're going to starve.
Right. Your dog's going to not have food.
So,
right.
Yeah.
They don't have that study, so obviously it's fine.
Yes.
That's just what
they don't need it. They will not call for it.
And look, everyone that works in these administrations comes from Wall Street, right? They're former Goldman Sachs bankers. They're all part of the deep banking state, right? They then become cabinet members inside of these administrations. Or they become Treasury secretaries, or they become Federal Reserve chairmen. It's all one big fraternity or sorority. And there's never going to be a study about this. They're going to actually look at the greenhouse gas emissions of Wall Street. Like I will eat my hat if that ever happens. If they ever do a study on how but here's the thing, they all pay lip service to this idea of ESG. Right?
Yeah.
So that's how they get around this. Like Wall Street preemptively says that we are really advancing ESG, environmental science and governance, and we're really out in front on this. So no, Wall Street, we already police ourselves.
Yeah.
We are already taking care of our own. So you don't need to police us because we've got this ESG metric that we use, which is a total bullshit metric, by the way.
Well, I do think this is sort of one thing that most governments can rally around is they do not want a cryptocurrency society, except El Salvador, right? But most governments don't. And if you look at the history of money, which this is a fascinating book that I want to recommend. It's called Layered Money. I have a tiny little image of the book cover here. But this gives you a whole history of how money, the history of money in society. And he says worldwide demand for coins boomed due to their economic advancements, and governments became the largest supplier, but there was no reason for governments to really ever become involved in the game of money. It was only because rulers found it impossible to resist immortalizing themselves, right? Putting Caesar on the coin, minting coins in their names engraved with their faces to circulate as money within their borders. This wasn't, however, purely a form of regal vanity. Coin mints gave governments the power to use money to their own benefit, leading to lasting societal impact and the rise and fall of empires. Now, what does that mean? That means a government could say, a gold coin is worth whatever, right? And then they could slowly reduce the amount of gold that was in that coin, or silver or nickel or whatever, and therefore give themselves money. This is how this happened. Likewise, now the dollar is something that the government can give itself more of. That cannot happen with a blockchain currency. It's impossible, right? And so do you think for a second that they are going to give up this power and let global cryptocurrency replace what is inefficient and unfair to us? Of course not. That's why we're already seeing behaviors like this. Check this out. This happened just last July, that New York officials ruled against a Bitcoin mining power plant because of climate goals. They're saying, oh, no, this will not. Like, if you really scrutinize what else New York was green-lighting, but oh no, not Bitcoin, right? I'm sure that there were other banks that built new branches and that was totally A-okay, but not this. Yet this is just yet another example of the government picking on things it doesn't like, picking winners and losers according to how it benefits them, and now using climate change as a scapegoat. Yet in the face of this, Bitcoin is starting to rebound from its slump this year. This is a screenshot from the newsletter this morning. You get these every day if you subscribe to Redacted. What are you curious about?
I would be curious as to how Disneyland or Disney World holds up against that, like compares.
Right, yeah.
In their usage.
Well, when you talk about water too, like that's a whole other thing, the use of water. And
well, I mean, you saw that in your gold story, like the use of water for extraction for gold and all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing, guys. We talk about. I know Catherine Austin Fitz always talks about like cash is king. And I've kind of, I vacillate on that. I used to think, well, cash is the worst. If you're holding cash, it's losing value every day, right? The US dollar is losing value every day. If you're holding it in a savings account, right, you're up against inflation. So if you have a dollar in the bank, it's dropping in value. So is a euro. But I have to say, it's like, I don't know, to have that physical dollar, physical coins, physical gold, physical silver that, in case of these collapses of these governments, these banks that shut down and won't let you get your money out of the bank. We see that all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw, what was the country we featured the guy a few weeks ago? He ran in with a gun. Was it Lebanon, right?
I think.
Lebanon. And then, of course, we've had Greece run on the banks in Afghanistan. You go to get your money out, and they're like, we don't even have your money. Fractional reserve banking. We don't even keep your money here in this bank anyway. So, I don't know.
It's sad when a vehicle holds more value than a dollar. Like they used to say, you drive a vehicle off a lot and it just drops in value.
It depreciates.
The dollar's dropping. Yeah.
Well, now we saw used cars appreciating. Like, what in the hell weird world are we in the past 2 years? Used cars were appreciating in value. Like, what in the world kind of bizarro world are we in right now?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's it's really interesting. Let us know in the chat if you guys are crypto investors, what you guys think about the Biden administration trying to take away crypto and clamp down on crypto mining.
Well, I, have read a lot about crypto, and I always sort of repeated this like, oh yeah, it's really bad for the earth. It's very energy consumptive. But then when you actually look at what is bad for the earth compared to all the other things that we are actively using, like, okay, then we should all turn off our iPhones, right? Because we don't want to use cell towers, which is where most of the energy comes from, or the actual production of that kind of stuff. So anyway, I won't be repeating those White House lines anymore.
That's right. Well, we've got more news to get to here on the show. We're going to talk about 9/11, the legacy of the 9/11 attacks and what you're not allowed to talk about. And Jay Thomas in our chat says, look into ice core samples. CO2 was way higher in times when it zipped by. We'll read it in the. We will read your super chats in a moment. We'll get to that one. But it zipped by so fast I couldn't see it.
All right. Meanwhile, as long as we're talking about the health of your financial life, let's talk about our friends over at Scoremaster. They want to tell you about the 3-week rule, and that might be the best financial advice ever. What is the 3-week rule? It's wait 3 weeks to buy that new car. Wait 3 weeks to refi your mortgage. Wait 3 weeks for any major financial purchase. Why? Because that's how fast the average Scoremaster user takes to boost his or her credit score, an average of 61 points. And look, 61 points, that's a lot when you're trying to finance anything, right? That can save you tens of thousands on everything we finance because you get the best interest rate, the most favorable terms on your loan. Scoremaster technology was developed by credit data scientists to boost your credit score higher and faster than you thought possible. Scoremaster is so easy, it takes just about a minute to get started, and you don't have to wait months for your best credit score. How many points can you add to your credit score? Be sure to visit scoremaster.com/redacted for this special 7-day trial that we arranged just for you. That's scoremaster.com/redacted. Once again, scoremaster.com/redacted.
So get in your super chats now, and I want to thank everyone for smashing that like button. How many likes do we have on this video today? We have wait a minute. We have 14,000 people watching us right now, but only 4,000 likes. Can you smash that like button, please? It helps us push out into the YouTube algorithm so that more people can see what we do here, and try to bring more people into the fold so they can learn and listen to the news that's important. So please do that. And over on Rumble, if you will, all of our friends on Rumble, we see you. Hi, guys. Please also hit that Rumble button, too. Rumble.com/redacted. So thanks to all of you over there. All right, it's time to talk about the legacy of the 9/11 attacks. Now, yesterday on 9/11, I published a video. It wasn't about 9/11 at all. It was about the reordering of the global financial system around Russia and China and the BRICS nations and the collapse of the U.S. dollar, the euro, and the British sterling. But one of our viewers left an interesting comment on that video. Here was the comment. Why no mention of 9/11? He said. Okay. Well, what was the person looking for? Does this person every year on 9/11 hang out on the internet and look for people who are not talking about 9/11 and then remind them why they should be talking about 9/11. Hey, it's 9/11. Why are you talking about anything other than 9/11? For instance, do they honor 9/11 by watching YouTube videos? And if that video doesn't mention 9/11, they call them out like, hey, Mr. Beast, I'm watching your video about eating the world's largest slice of pizza on 9/11, but you didn't mention anything about the Twin Towers. How can you possibly eat pizza on this day without talking about the 9/11 attacks? I really thought a lot about this, actually, over the past 24 hours because
it's a ridiculous sort of way to behave around the internet. Like, why are you on the internet?
Yeah, why are you here on this day on the internet when 9/11 happened? So I was thinking...
Well, then there's like 1,000 things that have happened on 9/11, not just one thing.
Yes.
Right, and so I wanted to figure out...
Why aren't you paying homage to the cheesecake today?
I was like, I wanted to... What was this person hoping that I would say about 9/11? Hoping that I would post like a never forget hashtag? Was that person hoping I would publish a video when I talked about the innocent people killed in the Twin Towers or Flight 93 in Pennsylvania or the Pentagon? 9/11 is also an important date for the country of Chile, right? Chile, it's the date when the CIA started a coup and installed a violent dictator named Pinochet to overthrow the Allende government because the U.S. didn't like Allende, right? Pinochet killed thousands of people, helped by the CIA. That happened on 9/11. Should I have done a video about that on 9/11? Maybe that was what he was talking about. What about December 7th? When December 7th rolls around, should I do a video on Pearl Harbor?
December 7th's my dad's birthday. Is it okay to wish him a happy birthday, or should I
It's my birthday too.
No,
Oh.
no
It's not.
birthdays.
It's only
It's
Pearl
I
Harbor
don't
Day.
celebrate. I don't celebrate though.
You're not allowed.
I'm
It's
absolutely
only Pearl
solemn
Harbor.
the entire day.
Okay.
Yeah, only Pearl
You wear
Harbor.
black all day because it's Pearl Harbor, and so
All
you can't
day.
do anything else. Again, I don't know what this person was hoping for, but it raises a really important question. And I don't want to mean to call this person out, but I did. But to me, it's also an impetus for us to talk about our social contract around the 9/11 attacks. What are we allowed to say about 9/11? What are we allowed to think about the 9/11 attacks? What does the mainstream media want us to remember about the 9/11 attacks? So let's go there.
Oh boy.
When we see President Biden yesterday laying a wreath at the cemetery on 9/11, what exactly are we honoring? He walks up and he's now, okay, we're going to give you wait for the lady to point you over to the wreath. Okay, can I go? Can I go? Can I go? And she gives him the go ahead and go ahead. Now you can go. Now you can go. So now he goes and he massages the wreath. Okay, which is odd. Okay, like why are you massaging the wreath? Right?
At least he didn't sniff it.
Okay. And that at least would make more sense. It's a pine wreath, right? And then, okay, he puts his hand up to it. I get that. All right, okay. So when we see President Biden laying the wreath, like what exactly are we honoring there? Americans typically like sanitized versions of history. It makes it easier to swallow, easier to explain to a third grade class. The U.S. government and now the Biden administration would like for you to think of the attacks this way. You're not supposed to talk about all of the other stuff around the 9/11 attacks. A group of freedom. So here's what you're supposed to think of, right? If you're in third grade or fourth grade, this is how they will teach it to you. A group of freedom-hating al-Qaeda terrorists led by Osama bin Laden wanted to attack our freedom-loving lives. They hated our freedoms. That's why they attacked us. Here's President Bush.
They hate our freedoms, our freedom of religion, our freedom of speech, our freedom to vote and assemble and disagree with each other.
So they hijacked some airplanes. They wrought terror on America in the greatest attack on U.S. soil since Pearl Harbor. Nearly 3,000 Americans lost their lives that day, but everyone loves a big comeback story.
I can hear you! I can hear you, the rest of the world hears you, and the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
So we launched a military attack to stop the evildoers, as President Bush called them. And we finally killed the ringleader, Osama bin Laden.
Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of al-Qaeda.
And that's about it. End of story, right? We're not allowed to talk about anything else. That's what the Americans and Western governments are supposed to think of. End of story. No more discussion about it. Just go about your barbecues and go about back to school and, don't think about anything more than this. So when a YouTube commenter then leaves a comment and says, why nothing on 9/11? Why, interesting. Why didn't you cover anything on 9/11 on 9/11? That's really what he's asking for, right? Just to do that, just to do the sanitized version of that. But the truth is much harder to swallow, and it's not what you're allowed to talk about in friendly circles or pleasant company. You'll be kicked out of the barbecue if you bring it up. Bring up anything else at your friend's dinner party, and you'll never be invited back. We can't talk about how the Western governments used 9/11 and used the 9/11 attacks as a hammer to launch a never-ending war on terror, endless wars. It's almost like they had it all planned. Just like 1 week after the attacks, President Bush had all of this rhetoric ready to go at this joint session of Congress. Watch.
Our enemy is a radical network of terrorists and every government that supports them. Begins with Al-Qaeda, but it does not end there. It will not end until every terrorist group of global reach has been found, stopped, and defeated.
Does that include the U.S.?
Yeah, that's everything. I mean, that's a wide open door right there, right? We can't talk about how 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi Arabian, how the U.S. knew that the plot to attack America was aided by Saudi nationals and members of the Saudi regime. Can't talk about that. Can't talk about that at all. And yet we didn't do anything to Saudi Arabia. We needed their oil. The FBI just last year started releasing the classified documents which proved our knowledge of the Saudi connection. We can't talk about how the Taliban, in fact, offered to turn over Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan in exchange for us not invading their country. Yeah, how many of you, be honest with me, how many of you knew that part of the story? That in fact, the Taliban specifically offered to turn over bin Laden. Like, you don't need to invade this country. We've got it. We'll help you out. No more. You don't have to do this. Why? Why would you go after and destroy a whole country? Yet most Americans don't even know that. They could have saved tens of thousands of lives, $2 trillion. But we turned them down. Why? It's kind of like
we wanted a war?
Yeah, it's kind of like we wanted a war, right? It's kind of like when Boris Johnson flies in to meet Vladimir Zelensky in Ukraine and tells him not to negotiate peace.
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of like they want a war. Yeah, maybe I'm just being cynical. You know the answer, though, right? You already know the answer to this. We can't talk about why the United States and Britain manufactured a connection to Iraq, a fake connection to Iraq, so that we could invade and then topple Saddam Hussein under the guise of a global war on terrorism. We killed more than 1 million people in Iraq, hundreds of thousands of innocent people. George Galloway says it best.
Killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed 1 million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war.
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was still
already
in
done.
Parliament...
Yeah. Few people have the gall. If she was still in Parliament, I wouldn't do that. I learned my lesson on the first million I've killed.
It's funny how I didn't notice this in our intro because I've watched him a bunch of times, but she literally rolls her eyes.
Like, how dare,
Like,
okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
I did that.
I voted for this war that killed 1 million people. That was...
So I bounced a check.
I had a bad day. And most damning of all, we can't talk about how shortly after 9/11, the United States and Britain started arming and financially supporting Al-Qaeda. Yes, that's right. How many of you honestly knew that? In country after country, the United States started using Al-Qaeda to attack governments that it didn't like. In Syria, for instance, as journalist Kevork Almasian, friend of our show, had to say, the crazy part about 9/11 is that the U.S. decided 10 years later to support the same terror group, Al-Qaeda, that the United States claims it has attacked the Twin Towers. The CIA covert operation in supporting of Al-Qaeda has led to the killing of 500,000 people in Syria. Never forget 9/11. We can't talk about that. You'll be kicked out of your dinner parties if you do. We also can't talk about how it was only 2 years after 9/11 that the United States was arming Al-Qaeda fighters in the country of Georgia for years. years before, it led to its attacks on schools. How many of you knew about this? The Beslan attack. Like the now infamous Beslan school, where terrorists took 1,200 children and teachers hostage. It ended in the worst possible way. You can wrap your head around it. If your heart in any way goes out to the people of Sandy Hook, the parents of Sandy Hook, then just research the Beslan attack, and you'll never be the same. Here's U.S. Marine Justin Merrill, who was involved in this, tweeted this just yesterday. Justin, friend of the show, said less than 2 years after 9/11, I was sending gear to Pankesi Gorge, Georgia, to help Marines arm and train you-know-who at al-Qaeda camp before these freedom fighters then went and attacked Beslan. That was my wake-up call. It sounds so crazy that I never talked about it until lately. We can't talk about any of that in polite company, or you'll never be invited back to your dinner parties because it's too inconvenient. We can't talk about how the Biden administration just labeled political opponents as the next war on terror.
Yes.
Here's the Department of Homeland Security yesterday on 9/11. This is Secretary Mayorkas.
When 9/11 occurred in those years, we were very focused on the foreign terrorist, the individual who sought to do us severe harm, to enter the United States and do us harm. It then evolved. We began to be more and more concerned about the individual already resident in the United States, radicalized by a foreign terrorist ideology. Now we are seeing an emerging threat, of course, over the last several years of the domestic violent extremist, the individual here in the United States radicalized to violence by a foreign terrorist ideology, but also an ideology of hate, anti-government sentiment, false narratives propagated on online platforms, even personal grievances.
That, to me, might go down as one of the most stunning sound bites I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And
anti-government sentiment as a terrorist?
Yeah. Or if you believe in false narratives, you are now a terrorist in the United States. So he says, it's evolved. Forget about al-Qaeda. Forget about these people over here. Now we're just going to focus on political opponents in the United States. So we can't talk about that in polite company. You'll never be invited back. Those are the new terrorists, these people in the United States who believe these false narratives, the MAGA supporters. Like, those are the false narratives.
That's really terrifying. There was a quote in this book from G.K. Chesterton, who once wrote, "It's the test of a good religion whether or not you can joke about it," right? Mm-hmm. Can you ask questions? Can you joke around? Or is it like, don't ask questions, then that's not a good doctrine. That's not a safe dogma, right? Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what this soundbite is proving, that we are continually unsafe with any rhetoric that they don't like.
So by talking about this truth, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I made a big deal about that thing that they started where they're going to start policing pronouns and stuff. And Kamala Harris did a speech on it and everything. They brought the Attorney General in, and he talked about it. And I was making it a big deal, and everybody's like, "Why are you making such a big deal about this? It's not a big deal. Like, they're not going to ever come after your speech like that. They're not going to start putting people in jail for pronouns." But it's happening. It's happening in other countries, and it's coming here.
Yeah, it just happened in I think in Ireland. Or there was an arrest. There was an arrest. Sweden. Yeah, there was a no. I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know. Either Sweden or Switzerland are one of the countries that starts with SWA. It was one of those countries. I'm not sure, but it was a country that had an arrest over or someone using misgendering somebody.
Yes, this is a topic we are increasingly interested in, but increasingly afraid to talk about it here on this platform, and we want to find safe ways to do that. But
I mean, we're not afraid to talk about it. We're like, what's going to happen is we'll talk about it, and then we will get banned.
We'll get punished.
So I'm not afraid to talk about it. We talk about it all the time, but they change their guidelines and update this stuff all the time, and it's really terrifying.
On this platform is what we meant. Sorry.
Yeah. So by talking about the truth on 9/11, it doesn't diminish the thousands of Americans who were killed on that day, the lives ruined, the families torn apart, children raised without mothers or fathers. But you cannot pick and choose which parts of 9/11 are the cleanest and the easiest to talk about and leave out the rest. If you truly want to talk about 9/11, then you need to talk about it in its entirety. What happened and what caused it and what it led to, right? The only way to honor those 3,000 Americans who died on that day is to tell the truth about why they died, why America used those deaths as leverage to launch a forever war that cost millions of lives and then trillions of dollars. So if you want to talk about 9/11, I'm all ears. Just don't leave out the parts that matter the most. That's my thought on that. So when someone asks that question, are you going to talk about 9/11? Why no mention of 9/11?
Well, you know how he feels now. So you asked for it, you got it.
You got it. There you go.
If you want it, here
come and get it. All right, we've got some super chats to get to.
We do. We got Jan Norbdo with a super sticker. Thank you. Shelly Ann. Hi, Redacted fam. I'm a business admin student in the lovely dictatorship of Canada. One of my courses requires that we follow Canadian economic business news. Any suggestions for independent sources?
I like the guys. Hey, if you want something interesting, first of all, Rebel News does a great job, but also I spent the other night about 40 minutes watching a Canadian prepper live off the land. And I don't know how that would tie into your economics class, but Canadian Prepper does a great job on his YouTube channel. And he literally spent, he went to like negative 25 degree temperatures with no tent. And he built a lean-to against a tree, just out of trees. And it was all ASMR, so no talking. And he just built a whole lean-to and then built a fire. And it was negative 25 away from the fire. And it was 65 degrees in his little lean-to tent.
I don't think that counts.
Does
for
that
an
count?
Economics class, but it's
maybe.
fascinating.
I think it should.
It should. I don't know if it does, but hey, anyway, Rebel News, those guys, they do a great job. Some of the other ones are escaping my brain at the moment, but hello, Canada. We love you. We don't like your government.
Nina the Mystic, greetings from Canada. Red Pill Matrix, appreciate the platform C and L and D. So I'm thinking that's Clayton, and maybe they think your name is Latterly, and David?
Or
I like Latterly.
Well, my name has 2 L's in it, so maybe that's it.
Yeah. Is one of the
Mark
dogs with an
Adrezak.
L? I don't know.
No.
Okay.
C and L and D. So, Mark Adrezak, this retreat by Russia was probably a planned withdrawal so they can ramp it up now. Expect Russian military to get released like the Kraken soon.
So that's what Russia is saying. They're not quite coming out and saying that this was a planned retreat. What they're saying is that we made a decision to reposition forces and then regroup and launch a new attack in that region. Now, you could say that's propaganda on the part of the Russians. I don't know. But it does make a lot of sense throughout history to allow a weak spot as a funnel, to allow all of these people in with your best forces, your best artillery, your best everything, and then you literally clamp down on it. I mean, you don't have to go very far to see military history to see that this is a strategy that's worked over and over again.
Daniel, the FBI love being jackboot thugs. They get off on authoritarianism. The Gestapo were also, quote unquote, just doing their job.
Yeah.
That is a broad statement. I understand I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
A lot of secret police got off on that. I saw that in Portugal, and those are the only people that died during the revolution in Portugal in 1970.
Was the PIDE, right?
Was the
not
military police,
not the
secret
Salazar
military
government.
Yeah.
Jan Norbo with a super sticker. Reality is hard to digest. India withdraws from Indo-Pacific Trade Organization. U.S. is pissed off. Barely covered by Western media.
Oh, yeah. Because India, in a lot of ways, India is the fulcrum here. Like, India is, in all of this BRICS relationship, China, Brazil, Russia, India, South Africa, India is arguably the most important piece. Because they're kind of like leaning American, but they're leaning China and Russia, and they're like, we don't know where to go. Like, what's going to happen? And so they're stuck in the middle right now. And the U.S. is putting a hell of a lot of pressure on India to come on over to the U.S. dollar, stay over here. So good point.
Lander 15, the Kharkiv incident will end up like the German Autumn Mist operation of the Battle of the Bulge, where the Germans ended up getting wiped out in the end.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. That if that's the comparison they're trying to make, that's not a good comparison.
Trip Twitch, this is what real journalism is about. Love your show, Natalie and Clayton.
Oh, thank you so much.
I got included in that one. I appreciate it.
Brian Schnurr, as a crypto enthusiast in my great state of Florida, we are very crypto friendly. The Republican mayor of Miami, Francis Suarez, is continuing to move a fair people's currency forward.
Yeah.
Like it. Send me
Yes.
more information about that, if you will.
Yes, he's been doing a lot with businesses and paying. You're able to pay rent and all sorts of stuff. You're able to go in businesses and use crypto. The government employees are able to be paid in crypto. So, way to go, Miami.
Jay Thomas, look into the ice core samples. CO2 was higher many times for millennia. Oxygen was higher. Plant life was huge. This is a means of control. Also, fossil fuel isn't from fossils. It comes from above the mantle with a renewable.
I was telling you about this. It was a guest on Joe Rogan's podcast. I forget his name. He's a friend of Graham Hancock. He was specifically talking about the ice core samples and showing that his argument
there had been periods of high emission before,
really high emissions before, and it was followed by ice ages. Like we've have these periods and so it was a fascinating interview.
And in fact, in Bjorn Lundberg's book, he talks about high amounts of carbon emission actually makes the planet greener, but no one wants to talk about that because it seems like we wouldn't want to say any desirable effects as a result.
Randall Carlson, that's his name. Randall Carlson. Yes. Thank you.
Oh, everybody knows.
Everyone knew it.
Look
Thank
at that.
you.
You guys are doing your homework. I'm super impressed.
Yes, I'm still doing
Leo
some
Titian?
mining. Yes, I am. Katie will go.
Leo Titian, I vote Clayton for top gym heavy lifter using mind to move weights. Power.
Oh, thank you.
Very good.
Jay Thomas says, get on Locals. We can subscribe for $5 per month. The best thinkers are there. Barnes is there. Go ahead and tell him, Clayton. Break the news to her.
We are on Locals. Redacted new. I think our channel URL is just go to redacted.inc. Not .com. Go to redacted.inc. And right there's an option for you to join our free newsletter, which I hope you all do. But to the right of it is that you can join our Locals community. So please join our Locals community. We post community only stuff over there, interviews that you won't see other places, content. So yeah, come on over and join our Locals community.
And then last super chat from Gary F. Monson. Hey, Gary. Peace Man, India is underwater.
Oh.
What does that mean?
India. Well, a lot of flooding.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Right? That's what you're talking about.
It.
Yeah.
Okay. Who's Peace Man? Oh, is that just a slang?
Peace man.
Okay, sorry. I understood it with that.
Who's this India you're talking about? And
Who is this peace person
peace
in
man
India?
you're
I thought it was
talking about?
all innuendo. I could not take that literally. Sorry.
Let me just say, because we gotta treat kindness. We gotta do a better job in this world. I think of showing love and kindness. I want to say how much I love my wife and what an amazing job she did today on our daughter's 6th birthday.
Aw, thank you.
She worked her ass off for our little Eve, her 6th birthday today.
You know why, you guys? I rolled it out for this baby girl because one half of her life has been pandemic, and so she's missed 2 normal birthdays. She missed a lot of preschool. We were not allowed to bring cupcakes to class until just this year, and they didn't have to be individually wrapped. And I was super excited to do it. I normally don't bake for, usually it's Clayton that makes all the birthday cakes in this house. But I was like, wait, we can come to class? We can do this, with other students. And I even pulled my older 2 out of class to go to that too. And it was so exciting to have a birthday party with no masks and no individually wrapped shit and just homemade stuff. And so, we all owe this population of children a big ol' mea culpa, and this was my way of doing that.
Yes, OG says Clayton's a lucky man to have a beautiful wife. Someone also said Natalie's face when Clayton was about to say that I love my wife, she was like,
I was like, where's this going?
Where's this going? This is
Yeah.
suspect. What's going on here?
Like when I said today you're better than Prince William.
Yes.
That
Thank
was
you for
something.
that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thanks to all of you,
You guys
for
probably need to hurry and get to bed.
Yes. We need to go to bed. It's time.
To sleep.
It's time for the Battle of the Bulge, if you know what I mean.
No, I don't. That's scary.
Sorry. Just wanted to
I've got
bring
B-roll
it.
footage
Well, you
of that.
just
Hang on.
ruined it, man.
Just wanted to bring it full circle, you know?
Way to make it weird. All right, guys. We'll see you here tomorrow. I hope.
Yeah, there. Roll the Battle of the Bulge. We'll see you tomorrow, everyone. Bye.
Mm-hmm.